There's a silent leak in your financial system that's draining somewhere between $100,000 and $300,000 from your future. And the worst part is, you won't notice it's happening until it's too late. You check your bank account and see a decent balance. You're not rich, but you're not broke either. You're making progress, hitting your savings goals, maybe even investing a little. Everything looks fine on the surface. But that's exactly why this mistake is so dangerous. I'm talking about lifestyle creep, but not the way you think. Everyone knows the basic version. You get a raise, you upgrade your apartment, suddenly your bigger paycheck disappears into higher rent. That's obvious. What I'm describing is far more insidious because it operates in the invisible layer of your financial life, the part where small decisions compound into catastrophic outcomes over decades. Let me show you exactly how this works with real numbers. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Picture two people, same age, same starting salary of $60,000. Both get similar raises over their careers, both eventually hit six figures. Person A makes one critical mistake that person B avoids. That single difference costs person A over $200,000 by retirement. They worked the same hours, had the same opportunities, lived in the same city. The only variable was a pattern of tiny decisions that seemed completely reasonable at the time. What's the mistake? It's not buying lattes, it's not taking vacations, it's something far more subtle that financial advisors rarely talk about because, frankly, it doesn't generate fees for them. The mistake is this: allowing your baseline expenses to drift upward at the same rate as your income. Sounds harmless, right? You make more money, you spend a bit more money, you've earned it. You deserve nice things. That's the trap. Here's the math that changes everything. When you're making $60,000 and saving 10%, you're putting away $6,000 a year. Fast forward 5 years, you're now making $80,000. If you maintain that same 10% savings rate, you're saving $8,000. Looks like progress. You're saving more dollars than before. But here's what actually happened to your financial trajectory. Your expenses went from $54,000 to $72,000. You increased your spending by $18,000 annually. Meanwhile, your savings only increased by $2,000. You captured 10% of your raise and let 90% evaporate into lifestyle improvements you probably barely noticed 6 months later. Let's extend this pattern over 20 years. You go from $60,000 to $120,000. Your savings go from $6,000 to $12,000 annually. You doubled your savings, so you're winning, right? Wrong. Dead wrong. If instead of maintaining a 10% savings rate, you had kept your expenses frozen at that initial $54,000 level, do you know what happens? Every single dollar of your raises goes directly to savings and investments. By year 20, you're making $120,000 but still living on $54,000. You're now saving $66,000 per year instead of $12,000. That's not a typo. $66,000 versus $12,000. Same career, same income, same city. The only difference is whether you let your baseline expenses creep upward or whether you defended that line aggressively. Now let's compound this over 30 years with a conservative 7% return. The person who let their expenses drift ends up with roughly $1.2 million. Not bad. Enough to retire on if they're careful. The person who locked in their expenses, they end up with over $6 million. Same job, same salary progression. The difference is $4.8 million. And it all came down to whether they allowed lifestyle creep or whether they treated every raise as an opportunity to accelerate wealth building rather than inflate their daily life. You might be thinking this is unrealistic. Nobody can live on $54,000 for 30 years while making $120,000. And you're right, kind of. This is the extreme version to illustrate the principle. But here's what makes this devastating. Even small amounts of lifestyle creep destroy your financial future. Let's run a more realistic scenario. Instead of freezing expenses completely, you allow them to increase by half the rate of your income growth. You still feel like you're upgrading your life as you earn more. You're just doing it strategically instead of automatically. In this scenario, by year 20, you're spending $80,000 instead of $54,000. You've meaningfully improved your quality of life. Better apartment, nicer car, more dinners out, better vacations. But you're saving $40,000 annually instead of $12,000. After 30 years with that same 7% return, you end up with $3.8 million instead of $1.2 million. You added $2.6 million to your net worth simply by being deliberate about which lifestyle upgrades you accepted and which you delayed. This is the silent money mistake. It's not that you're buying stupid things or making obviously bad decisions. It's that you're letting your baseline drift upward on autopilot, and that drift is quietly stealing your future. The reason this is so dangerous is because it feels responsible. You're still saving 10%. You're still contributing to your 401k. You're still being good with money by conventional standards. Meanwhile, you're hemorrhaging potential wealth through 1,000 tiny decisions that seem completely rational in isolation. A slightly nicer apartment because you deserve it after that promotion. A car upgrade because your old one is getting unreliable. A gym membership at the fancy place because health is important. Organic groceries because you're investing in yourself. Each decision is defensible. Together, they're catastrophic. What makes this even more brutal is that the damage is invisible until it's too late. When you're 35 and making $85,000, you don't feel broke. You feel successful. You've got nice stuff. You go on decent vacations. You're living a good life. The problem is 40 years later when you realize you should be sitting on $4 million, but instead you have $1.2 million because you never questioned whether each small upgrade was worth the exponential cost to your future. And here's the truly maddening part. The truly maddening part is that you can't get those years back. You can't go back to age 27 and redo the decision to lease that luxury car. You can't retroactively choose the smaller apartment and invest the difference. The compound interest you lost on money you spent 15 years ago is gone forever. Time is the most powerful force in wealth building, and lifestyle creep steals it from you one seemingly insignificant decision at a time. But let me tell you what nobody else will. This doesn't mean living like a monk until you're 65. That's not what I'm advocating. What I'm saying is that every single dollar you spend should be a conscious choice, not an automatic upgrade because your income went up. Here's how this actually works in practice. When you get a raise, you pause. Not forever, just for a moment. You ask yourself 3 questions before touching that money. First, what percentage of this raise am I committing to savings before I even see it? Second, which specific aspect of my life would meaningfully improve with an upgrade? And third, is that upgrade worth more to me than financial freedom 5 years earlier? Most people never ask these questions. They just let their paycheck hit their account and watch their spending naturally expand to match it. That's the path to comfortable mediocrity and a retirement that starts at 70 instead of 55. Let me give you a real example of what strategic lifestyle management looks like. I know someone who went from making $45,000 to $180,000 over 12 years. Early on, they made a decision. They would allow themselves one meaningful upgrade per year, but everything else stayed locked. Year 1, they moved to a better apartment. Year 2, they bought a reliable used car. Year 3, they started eating out twice a week instead of cooking everything. But their gym membership? Still $10 a month at the basic place. Their phone plan? Still the cheapest option that worked. Their coffee still made at home. Every raise after that first upgrade went straight to investments. Not some of it, not after they felt comfortable, all of it. By age 38, they had $1.4 million invested. Their lifestyle was nice, way better than when they started, but it wasn't matching their income. And they didn't care because they knew something everyone else missed. They were buying time. Every dollar they didn't spend on upgrading their daily life was buying them days of freedom from mandatory work. Compare that to their colleague who started at the same salary, got similar raises, and ended up making the same $180,000. This person upgraded everything as their income climbed. Moved to a luxury apartment, financed a new car every few years, ate out constantly, had the premium everything. At 38, they had $340,000 saved. That's not nothing, but it's $1 million less than their peer. Same talent, same career trajectory, completely different financial futures. The gap between these two people isn't about intelligence or luck. It's about whether they let lifestyle creep happen automatically or whether they controlled it deliberately. Now here's what makes this even more powerful. Once you break the pattern, something psychological shifts. You stop measuring success by stuff and start measuring it by freedom. That $800 fancy coffee machine stops looking like an upgrade and starts looking like 2 weeks of financial independence you just traded away. The luxury car lease stops being a status symbol and starts being 3 years of mandatory work you just signed up for. This is when wealth building accelerates exponentially because you're no longer fighting yourself. You're not white-knuckling your way through deprivation. You genuinely want the investments more than the upgrades because you understand what they're actually buying you. But most people never get here. They stay trapped in the cycle where more money equals more spending, and they wonder why they never feel financially secure despite earning 6 figures. They blame the economy, or taxes, or their student loans when the real problem is they keep moving their financial goalposts backward every time they make progress. Think about what happens when someone making $60,000 gets bumped to $75,000. That extra $15,000 should be transformative. Invested over 30 years, it becomes $1.4 million. But what actually happens? They upgrade their apartment by $400 a month, lease a nicer car for $350, start shopping at Whole Foods for an extra $200, add streaming services and subscription boxes for another $100, and suddenly that raise generated 0 additional savings. They feel richer for about 6 months until the novelty wears off, and they're back to feeling exactly as financially stressed as before, just with nicer stuff. This is the insidious trap. The upgrades provide temporary satisfaction while permanently reducing your financial trajectory. You get a brief dopamine hit from the new car, then you're stuck with the payment for 5 years. You enjoy the bigger apartment for a few weeks, then it just becomes where you live and you forget you're paying an extra $400 monthly for it. Meanwhile, the person who banked that raise is compounding wealth in the background, and every year the gap between them grows wider. Not because they're smarter or more disciplined, but because they understood one simple truth that changes everything. Your lifestyle is not your life, and confusing the two is the most expensive mistake you'll ever make. So when that next raise comes, when you get that bonus, when you land that higher-paying job, remember this. You're standing at a fork in the road. One path leads to a slightly nicer daily existence and decades of mandatory work. The other leads to genuine financial freedom and the ability to choose how you spend your time. Most people choose the first path because they don't see it as a choice. They see it as finally being able to afford things they deserve. And look, I get it. After years of struggling, that upgrade feels earned. But here's what nobody tells you about that feeling. It's a loan against your future that comes with interest rates you can't imagine. Let me show you what I mean with actual numbers that'll make this concrete. Take someone earning $80,000 who gets bumped to $100,000. After taxes, that's roughly $1,200 extra per month. Now watch what typically happens. They move from a $1,400 apartment to a $1,900 one because they can finally afford a place with in-unit laundry. That's $500 gone. They upgrade from their paid-off Honda to a $450 monthly lease on a nicer car because their old one feels embarrassing in the company parking lot. They start eating out more because they're working harder and deserve it, maybe $200 extra monthly. Add another $50 for the gym membership they'll actually use this time. Do the math. That $1,200 raise just became zero savings with exactly the same financial stress, just at a higher altitude. But here's the alternative scenario that literally nobody takes. Same person, same raise, completely different decision. They keep the apartment, keep the car, keep the lifestyle exactly where it was when they were making $80,000. Every dollar of that raise goes straight into investments. That $1,200 monthly over 30 years at 8% returns becomes $1.8 million. Not a typo. $1.8 million from a single raise that most people blow on lifestyle upgrades they forget about within months. The apartment with in-unit laundry? 6 months later, it's just doing laundry. The dopamine is gone. The nicer car? After the new car smell fades, it's just traffic and insurance premiums. But that $1.8 million? That's walking into your boss's office at 55 and saying you're done because you want to be, not because you're forced to keep working to maintain a lifestyle you don't even notice anymore. Now, some of you are thinking this sounds miserable. Living below your means forever, never enjoying the fruits of your labor, dying with the most money in the graveyard. But you're missing the point entirely. This isn't about deprivation. It's about something way more interesting. The secret is that controlling lifestyle creep doesn't mean freezing your lifestyle permanently. It means being strategic about when and how you upgrade. Instead of automatically upgrading everything the moment you can afford it, you upgrade deliberately based on what actually improves your life, not what signals to others that you've made it. Here's how this works in practice. When you get that raise, you ask yourself a different question. Not, what can I afford now? But what would genuinely make my life better? And you better have a real answer, not just vague feelings about deserving nice things. Maybe you genuinely hate your commute and a nicer apartment closer to work would give you 10 extra hours weekly. Calculate it. If that upgrade costs $400 monthly but saves you 10 hours, you're essentially buying time at $10 per hour. For some people, that's worth it. For others, it's not. Or maybe you're actually using your car for client meetings and the beat-up Honda is legitimately hurting your professional image. Okay, but that doesn't mean you need a $450 lease. A $15,000 used car that looks professional accomplishes the same thing for a fraction of the cost. This is the framework that changes everything. Intentional upgrades based on genuine value, not automatic upgrades based on affordability. And here's what's wild. When you operate this way, you often discover you don't actually want most of the upgrades you thought you wanted. That bigger apartment? You realize you're barely home anyway. The luxury car? You discover the stress of door dings and higher insurance isn't worth it. The designer clothes? Nobody notices or cares except you. One by one, the upgrades you thought you were sacrificing stop looking like sacrifices and start looking like expensive distractions from what you actually want, which is freedom. I watched this play out with someone I know who got promoted from $70,000 to $110,000 in 3 years, through 2 job changes. $40,000 increase. Every single person in her life expected her lifestyle to transform. Her parents asked when she was buying a house. Her friends wondered why she still had roommates. Her colleagues couldn't understand why she drove a 10-year-old Camry. But she understood something they didn't. She ran the numbers and realized that banking even half that increase meant she could retire at 45 instead of 65. 20 extra years of freedom. So she made a deal with herself. She'd upgrade exactly one thing that mattered most to her, which turned out to be travel, and she'd invest the rest. 5 years later, she's been to 23 countries, has $380,000 invested, and is on track to walk away from mandatory work at 46. Her friends who upgraded everything the moment they could afford it? They have nicer apartments and newer cars, but they're trapped in jobs they hate for at least another 2 decades, probably 3. The difference isn't income. It's not investment strategy. It's not even discipline, really. It's understanding that lifestyle creep is optional and choosing to opt out is the closest thing to a financial cheat code that exists in real life. Because here's the truth that sounds harsh but sets you free. Nobody cares about your lifestyle upgrades except you, and even you stop caring about them faster than you think. The car you thought you needed to impress clients becomes invisible after 3 weeks. That apartment upgrade you convinced yourself would change everything? You stop noticing the granite countertops after about 2 months. The premium gym membership, the designer watch, the latest phone, all of it fades into background noise faster than milk goes bad in your fridge. This is the hedonic treadmill, and it's specifically designed to keep you broke. What doesn't fade? The feeling of checking your investment account and watching compound interest do its thing. The power of saying no to projects that drain your soul because you've got 6 months of expenses banked. The option to take a month off and figure out what you actually want from life. These things compound. They get better with time instead of worse. But let's address the elephant because I know what you're thinking. This sounds miserable. This sounds like living in a cave eating beans while your money piles up unused. And if that's what you're hearing, you've completely missed the point. I'm not suggesting you live like a monk. I'm suggesting you spend money on things that actually improve your life and stop spending it on things that don't. The difference is everything. Most people never figure out what actually makes them happy because they're too busy buying what they think should make them happy. They upgrade their car because that's what successful people do, then wonder why they still feel empty. They move to a bigger place because more space equals more happiness, right? Except now they're stressed about higher rent and they're filling that space with furniture they'll barely use. The formula is backwards. You don't earn more to spend more. You earn more to buy freedom, and freedom only comes from the gap between what you make and what you spend. I want you to imagine something specific. Picture yourself 5 years from now. In scenario 1, you've upgraded everything. Nicer apartment, better car, designer clothes, latest tech, fancy restaurants every week. Your lifestyle perfectly matches your income. You look successful. But you're also trapped. Your expenses are $7,000 monthly and you can't drop below that without feeling like you're failing. One bad quarter at work and you're panicking. The thought of switching careers is impossible because you need this specific income level. You're living well, sure, but you're not free. Now, scenario 2, same income, but you kept your expenses at $3,500 monthly. You invested the difference religiously for 5 years. You've got $180,000 working for you now. You're driving the same reliable car. You're in a perfectly fine apartment that's maybe not Instagram-worthy but serves your needs. And here's the part that matters. You could walk away from your job tomorrow and survive for 4 years without income, or take that risky startup opportunity, or negotiate from a position of complete strength, or simply work less because you don't need every paycheck. Which scenario is actually living better? The wealthy understand something that breaks most people's brains. Spending money is the easiest thing in the world. A child can do it. A drunk person can do it. A dog could probably do it if you gave them a credit card. There's zero skill involved in converting money into stuff. But converting money into freedom, into options, into genuine security, that requires strategy. It requires saying no to immediate gratification. It requires understanding that the best things money can buy aren't things at all. Every dollar you spend is a choice, not just about what you're buying, but about what you're giving up. The $200 dinner isn't just $200. It's the future value of that money compounded over time. It's the hour of your life you'll have to work to earn it back. It's the opportunity cost of every other thing you could have done with it. I'm not saying never have the nice dinner. I'm saying know what you're trading and make sure it's worth it. The people who achieve financial independence aren't special. They're not smarter or more disciplined or blessed with better opportunities. They just understood one simple truth earlier than everyone else. Your income is a tool, and like any tool, it can be used to build something or wasted through misuse. Most people use their income to build a lifestyle that requires their income. The smart ones use their income to build a foundation that eventually doesn't need their income. Think about what that means. Right now, you're probably trading time for money. 40, 50, 60 hours weekly converting your finite life into dollars. The goal isn't to do this forever. The goal is to reach a point where your money generates enough money that your time becomes optional. And the only way to reach that point is by maintaining the gap, investing the difference, and resisting every urge to inflate your lifestyle to match your income. This is the choice you're making every single day, whether you realize it or not. Every upgrade you auto-approve because you can afford it pushes that freedom date further into the future. Every unnecessary expense is choosing immediate comfort over future independence. And here's the part that should terrify you. Time moves one direction only. The lifestyle creep you allow today doesn't just cost you money now. It costs you years of your life later. So the question isn't whether you can afford that upgrade. The question is whether that upgrade is worth delaying your freedom by 6 months, a year, 5 years, because that's the actual cost. And once you start seeing it that way, most upgrades stop looking like rewards and start looking like exactly what they are: expensive distractions from the only thing that actually matters, which is getting your time back. The math is simple, but the execution breaks most people. Every year you maintain lifestyle creep costs you exponentially more than the year before because compound interest works in both directions. It multiplies your investments when you feed it, and it multiplies your losses when you starve it. That raise you got 3 years ago that disappeared into a nicer apartment, you didn't just lose the extra rent. You lost what that rent would have become by now and what it would become over the next 20 years, and the returns on those returns. Here's what nobody wants to hear. You're probably already caught in this trap. Your expenses have been drifting upward for years, and you haven't noticed because it happened gradually. $5 here, $20 there, an extra subscription, a small apartment upgrade, slightly nicer groceries. None of it felt significant. All of it added up to thousands of dollars monthly that could have been building your escape route instead of padding your lifestyle. But here's the good news, and it's actually great news. You can stop this today. Not next month when you've planned better, not next year when you're more disciplined. Today. Look at your last 3 months of spending. Find the upgrades you barely notice anymore. The premium subscriptions you forgot you had. The convenience purchases that became habits. Cut them. Not someday. Right now. Then take whatever you were spending on that forgotten luxury and automate it straight into investments before you can talk yourself out.